Welcome to Basics for Gamers presents Animal Examples in Pathfinder. If you haven't already watched our knowledge video on animals, you're encouraged to do so before viewing these examples. A link to that video may be found in the description and in the upper right corner of this screen. In our first example, Harsk decides that he wants some canine company and purchases a dog from the town's kennel for 2 silver pieces. While walking down a road, they encounter a pair of goblins who attack them. At the start of combat, the GM determines that the dog senses danger and therefore panics. The dog receives the Frightened 4 and Fleeing conditions. On Harsk's first turn, he uses Command an Animal to order the dog to move behind the rocks. His nature skill bonus is +5. On the dog's stat block, we see it has a +4 bonus to will saves, which means its will DC is normally 14. However, since it's under the effect of the Frightened 4 condition, that lowers all of its DCs by 4, which means the dog will be resisting Harsk's nature check with DC 10 instead of the usual DC 14. The GM could further modify this DC as they believe is appropriate, but Harsk and the dog haven't really had a chance to bond yet, so we're going to say that the dog's attitude towards him is indifferent and just leave the DC as is. Harsk rolls a 7 on the D20 for a total of 12, which is enough to succeed. He commands the dog to take a single stride action to behind the rocks. This does not occur now, and instead the dog will follow that order on its turn. Harsk spends his second action striding to the goblins, and his third action he strikes one of them. The second goblin takes its turn next, and then it's the dog's turn. It spends its first action to stride behind the rocks as it was commanded, and its second and third actions are spent however the GM deems appropriate, but is temporarily not under the effects of the fleeing condition because it was successfully commanded this round. At the end of the dog's turn, its frightened condition lowers from 4 to 3. The next round runs much the same as before, except when Harsk uses Command an Animal this turn, he has to beat DC 11 instead of DC 10 because the dog's frightened condition lowers by 1 at the end of all of his turns. And this time he doesn't want the dog to move anywhere, he just wants it to stay still. There is no action called stay or hold, but I believe mechanically he would command the animal to take the stride action, but move 0 feet. He succeeds, play continues, and on the dog's turn, it stays in place as it was commanded, and its frightened condition lowers from 3 to 2. At the start of the third round of combat, the first goblin decides there's only one thing that it hates more than a dwarf, and that's a dog. It readies its short bow and fires an arrow at the dog. Guard dogs normally have an armor class of 15, but because the dog is frightened too, its armor class lowers to 13. Remember, armor class is a type of DC, and therefore it is reduced by the frightened condition. Regardless of if this attack hits or misses, the dog's frightened condition is immediately reset to Frightened 4 because it was attacked. On Harsk's turn, he decides that he needs backup, so he spends his first action striking a goblin, and then with his second action, he uses Command an Animal to tell the dog to stride over to the goblin, and with his third action, he commands the dog to strike the goblin. Because stride and strike are both basic actions, they can be bundled together, so to speak, and Harsk will only need to roll his nature check one time to cover both of those basic actions. Again, his nature skill has a +5 bonus, which is contested by the dog's will DC, which has been lowered to 10 again because it is Frightened 4. We'll say that he succeeds this roll, and the dog does not move yet, but will take those commanded actions when it is its turn. On the second goblin's turn, it holds its ground and attacks Harsk again. Now, on the dog's turn, it spends its first action obeying Harsk's first command, which was to move to the goblin. Harsk's player wants the dog to move to this space so that he can have flanking, but the GM rules that the dog would follow the most direct path to the target and therefore moves the dog here instead. On the dog's second action, it follows the second command that it was issued, which was to strike the goblin. So the dog makes a melee attack and tries to bite the goblin. Normally it would have a +6 bonus to this attack, but this time it only gets a +2 bonus because attack rolls are a type of check, and therefore the bonus is reduced by 4 because of the Frightened 4 condition. This still leaves one action left for the dog, and the GM will spend that however they believe is appropriate. This could be another attack, or moving away a little, or just sitting there and doing nothing, or anything else that the GM thinks a dog would do in that situation, but the rules suggest that animals spend their actions either defending themselves or moving away. At the end of the dog's turn, its frightened condition lowers to Frightened 3, and the combat continues as normal. Let's reset this scenario and look at the last round one more time. But this time, after Harsk commands the dog to move to the goblin and attack it, the goblin, who is in initiative between Harsk and the dog, realizes the fight is not going well and decides to make a break for it. So it moves to here as it tries to flee. Now it's the dog's turn. With its first action, it obeys the command to stride to the goblin. However, the dog has a speed of 30 feet, and the goblin is now further away than that. So the question becomes, what does the dog do after its first action ends, and it has moved as far as it can on that action, but hasn't satisfied the command of moving to the goblin yet? And it can't strike that goblin, which was the second command it was issued, because, again, it's not in range of the goblin. There's a couple of different ways to handle this, and by raw, an argument could be made that it would stop after its first action and do nothing, but for what it's worth, I think the right call is that the dog will spend as many actions as needed to follow the first command that it was given. So in this example, it would spend 2 actions to move to the goblin, even though Harsk only spent 1 action to command it to stride, and then it would use the strike action against the goblin as it was commanded as well. If you would like to see the companion course that explains the rules behind these examples, you can find a link to it in the description and highlighted on the screen as well. Feel free to leave in the comments any suggestions you have for future examples, and if you would like to support this channel, then please be sure to subscribe and click the bell so you never miss out on our future videos. If you would like to use any of the maps that you've seen in these examples in your own games, you may find them at Maps of Mastery. A link to that store may be found in the description. Thanks for watching, take care, and we will see you soon with more Basics of Pathfinder.